Good afternoon or evening, and welcome. Kensington Senior Living has 7 unique communities, 4 located in Virginia, Maryland, and New York, and 3 sister communities located in California. Kensington is truly privileged to support care partners and professionals from coast to coast. We focus on relationship-based care built on the foundation of our promise to love and care for your family as we do our own. That promise was what initially drew me to become a member of the Kensington family, as my father lived there for almost 7 years. It is programs such as the one you are attending now that are so important for those of us walking through a caregiver journey to hear from expert professionals on keeping us current with the latest advances in care, management, and treatment of conditions that affect seniors and their families. Today's title, Knowledge is Power, is the second of a 2-part series. You can find part 1 on any of the Kensington websites, and we will send not only today's webinar to all registrants, but also a copy of part 1. We encourage you to share with friends and family. Our goal today is for you to learn from WayWiser about scams and steps to take action to defend yourself and others. I'd like to introduce Benjamin Weiss, Senior Director of Marketing. Benjamin, can you join us, please? Benjamin is joining us today for Lindsay Faeder, who unfortunately is ill. Please, Benjamin, share a few words about yourself and introduce today's program.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Susan. Welcome, everyone. As Susan already said, my name is Benjamin Weiss. I'm the marketing director here at WayWiser. We're a secure private place for families to prepare for all of those what-if scenarios that life might throw their way. Again, I am sorry that Lindsay couldn't be here today. She really, really wanted to, but she's feeling quite sick at the moment. But as you know, that's sort of how it works, right? Things can change on a dime, and that's exactly why we are all here today. We want to learn how to set ourselves up for success and prepare for these moments in life that we don't necessarily expect. And our methodology can help you organize and manage your loved one's health and financial well-being through each stage of life, setting you up for all of these what-if moments. So the topic of today's seminar, it's near to the hearts of everyone at WayWiser, as there really isn't a person on the planet who hasn't watched a loved one getting older and need a bit of help. And in particular, the founders of WayWiser all had to watch from the sidelines as an older member of their own families fell victim to ruthless scams that stole, honestly, small fortunes from either the parents or the grandparents. And that's why we're on a mission to make sure that does not happen to other families. If you did miss the first part a few weeks ago, as Susan mentioned, you can access that online. You'll get it emailed to you. That featured Louis Carvajal-Kim, who's a cybersecurity expert and former counterintelligence special agent, and also Kristin Kieffer, who's a senior director at FINRA. They spoke on the topic of the scams that are out there and the resources available to protect yourself and your loved ones. But today's panel that we're about to get into is focused on how to take steps today to protect your future. How to, as we like to say, invest a bit of time today to protect your tomorrow. How do you start a conversation with an aging parent about financial protection? How do you know when to step in? And what are the tools that are available to help you get organized? So in a moment, we'll kick off a short testimonial from the Chief Technology Officer here at WayWiser, Randall Burrier. Randall has an extensive background in groundbreaking technologies, including some of the modern security protocols like blockchain technology. And he recently helped Lindsay, our CEO, with an incident of fraud in her own family. After Randall, we hear from Kristin Owens, who's a former Federal Reserve executive, and we'll ran that discussion with Tami, Anastasia, a dementia care expert, and we'll also come back to myself for some actionable tips. There are no needs to take notes today. As mentioned, we're going to send you all of this information. So really just dial in, pay attention. If you do have something to write down, go for it, but don't worry too much. Without further ado, Randall, if you want to jump in here and take control and share the story, that would be amazing.
Hello, everyone. As Ben mentioned, I'm the Chief Technology Officer of WayWiser. I have an expertise in crypto and blockchain, supply chain, behavioral healthcare, and then a former life, actually, mine warfare for the U.S. Navy. So a long career stretching a lot of different backgrounds. So a couple of months ago, I basically was forwarded an email calling out an issue that somebody in the family was having problems with, some Lindsay's family. And they basically weren't really aware of the details of crypto. It was a cryptocurrency scam. There had been a recent death in that part of the family, and he had inherited some money. So they think that somehow they found out through an online report of a death that he was an inheritor or a potential inheritor. So he was essentially targeted directly. So I was asked if I could get in there and have a conversation with him about crypto and blockchain, and basically try to get an understanding of what was going on, because he wasn't really being open with the family about it. All right, so I had the first call with him, and he was guarded, as you can imagine. So he gave me a pretty limited description of what had transpired. He sounded a little anxious, and I think it may have been interpreted me incorrectly. It could have just been irritation that he actually had to be on a call at all. And he basically went through and said that he sent $500 off after some conversation about investing in crypto. And for him, $500 was not a lot of money, to be clear. So thusly, probably the irritation. They showed him a profit sheet on having put that money into that crypto, and how the crypto goes up and down, which, if you're not familiar, it's essentially just a speculative market. Lots of volatility, and ultimately more likely for loss scenarios than you would in a normal managed fund. So the reality is they created a fake cryptocurrency, a fake everything, and it looked legitimate, which I'll get to very briefly at the end. So they showed him the information. He didn't disclose anything else. He just said that they wanted him to help set up a crypto pool as well. And then he ended the call almost abruptly as I'm ending that point. So the second call, which is about a week later, at this point, maybe it was my lack of trying to ask him a million questions, or not trying to follow up in a way that seemed, I don't know, it seemed like unnecessary. If he wanted to talk, he would have. So he called, and at that point, he was much more open. I think he was more paranoid at that point, much more open. At this point, he actually told me that he had invested $10,000 in the second opportunity, and he started to get a little bit more anxious, because he wasn't sure where it was at and whether he could get it back. And the whole process started with instant messaging on Telegram. And because they had showed him profit, he just assumed, this is legitimate, I can go and do the next thing. So he asked me about how pools work, whether he has any liability, responsibility to other people, and I kind of talked him through a little bit of that. And then, we dropped the call. At that point, he sent me a lot of pictures of, his phone, of his computer, of all these different devices where he had been having conversations with this third party, like messages where he, redacted certain things like names and stuff like that. I sent him a text back, because I had given him my number essentially to send that stuff, and said, let's have another call whenever whenever you're up to it. So the very next week, maybe just three or 4 days later, we talked about it again. And he told me that he had to get his money back, and they asked him to do something really quite bizarre, like send money back via a Telegram message with a specific set of words and a code, which, yeah, you're probably thinking the same thing I am. As you would expect, they weren't very responsive. Nothing was returned, and they actually asked if he wanted to invest more. So then at that point, that's when things kind of, in my opinion, got a little more unusual. He started to tell me about things he noticed on his phone, on his machine, that were different, icons being in different places, contacts showing up top of a contact list that weren't there before. And, as a as an outsider, I didn't know if this was something different than just a conversation, right? I thought this might be a cognitive problem. It could be something else altogether. And trying to maintain the trust. There's this boundary of maintaining a trust and then making sure his family is aware of it. So I let them know that there's something more to it. Can you maybe get on a call with me and him so we can talk through this a little bit more? He bought a burner phone. He replaced his computer. I mean, so he went pretty far with this. But by then, he was just really willing to just talk and have conversations and be transparent. I would say, unlike what he could do with his family. And I think the issue we get into situations like this is that he didn't feel comfortable talking to his friends and family. He felt very embarrassed about it. At one point, he just said, I'm not a fool. And he isn't. Like he was actually formerly fairly technical, based on some conversations we had. So I think where he got more open is he realized people in my field get scammed, but this is not atypical. The problem is about awareness. The problem is about having transparency with family so they can actually help. Because in this case, there is a slight amount of cognitive dysfunction at that point. But you take that plus sophisticated scams, sophisticated people that are preying on you day in and day out. I mean, eventually you're going to click the wrong button. You're going to click OK instead of cancel. At some point, you're going to get exposed. And the best thing you can do is be in a position where people can help you. Trying to go at your own is where you can get into a pickle. And sometimes these are dramatically impactful to your well-being and your financial well-being. And in this case, luckily, it wasn't as bad because of where he was fiscally. But I established that line of trust, and I was able to explain to him at the end that, based on my expertise, that the probability of there being anything else going on other than exactly what you were exposed to and the continuation of what they would want from you, i.e., just the money, is about as far as it's going to go, and that anything else that you may be noticing may just be, an artifact of being anxious about it. And I said, if I don't sleep enough, I notice things that maybe aren't exactly there. But I said, are you sleeping? And he said, I haven't slept since yesterday. And so I was like, yeah, so you see what I'm talking about. This is fairly typical when you're getting anxious. So at the end of the day, it was a great conversation. I helped talk him off the ledge. He actually wasn't even living at home at that point for 3 days. That last conversation, he went back. He was doing better. He got a lot more open with his son actually about about things like this, and I just did what I could to help talk him off the ledge based on what I know, and that's the best I could really do for anybody in that situation. And hopefully, this isn't something that has to keep happening for people, and that's why we're here. So.
A couple takeaways, and one is what you said. If everybody can leave with something today, none of us are protected because you always think that's not going to happen to me. I'm too smart to let that happen to me, is one takeaway, because I think we're dealing here with very sophisticated technology and people that are not good people, which are scary to deal with because you're not really understanding their motivations. And then the time to earn his trust, it sounds to me like a critical factor here. Typically we all want to jump in and fix it, but we're dealing with someone. I mean, I just think of my parents or me, and you're a little embarrassed, like, how did I let this happen? And you're afraid. And then in your case, he became paranoid, like, oh my gosh, are they spying? Like, I can't sleep and I got to get a burner phone. I mean, so it's really nice that you took the time. And I think the other thing that's so great here is that you acted as a conduit between his son and him, and you bridged that back together. So thank you so much, Randall.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one comment I'll make is that, towards the end, I was able to right-size my concern around the cognitive area, because at first I thought it was much more extreme, but because I learned of his background in certain types of intelligence, it made me realize why I got a burner phone. It was less reactive than I originally thought, but he was still having issues, and luckily I was able to intervene. So thank you a lot, Susan.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And next, thank you, Randall. Next, I'd like to welcome Kristin. And Kristin is joining us from Austin, Texas. And if you could share with the audience a few words about yourself, and then we'll get to it. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. And I just want to thank Kensington and WayWiser for asking me to speak today on such an important topic. So I'm Kristin Owens. I was an investigator at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, where I worked for 18 years before recently resigning due to a family relocation. Part of my responsibilities at the Fed was to manage the anti-fraud program. And although resigned from the Fed, I will still take any opportunity I can to engage in community outreach just like this regarding my experience with frauds and scams and to help promote public awareness. So I'm just gonna share some slides. I promise there's not too many. Okay. So yeah, I promise they're not too wordy. We're not going to go through too many slides. I just always like to start with this quote in my presentations, this quote by Sophocles. I just think it's words to live by, especially for fraudsters. Rather fail with honor than succeed by fraud. So quickly to go through the agenda for the next few minutes, introduction already completed. I'd like to quickly give some background on the New York Fed's anti-fraud program. Then I'm going to highlight a few scams that I saw continuously reported on during my time at the Fed. There's about 4 or 5 that I'm going to go through. During last week's part 1 of this seminar series, I believe very current frauds were discussed, including crypto and AI, but I'm sort of going to focus more on the old school email, text, money-based scams, as they're always around. In fact, I recently read an article put out by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners entitled, hold on, I wrote it down, "The Resurgence of Old School Fraud in the Age of Advanced Technology." So basically, fraudsters out there, they're aware that fraud examiners such as myself are now more proficient in detecting digital fraud. So they're going back to the more traditional schemes. So the New York Fed's anti-fraud program was created in 2001, soon after 9/11, where there was a huge uptick in scams using the name of the Federal Reserve. Fraudsters prey on vulnerability, and that was a very vulnerable time for Americans. In fact, we saw another huge surge in scams during the pandemic, which I'll touch upon in a bit. Hundreds of victims report to the Federal Reserve monthly regarding scams using the name of the Federal Reserve. And I just want to note that what I'm going to go over today are only scams that fraudulently use the name of the Federal Reserve, but you can replace Federal Reserve with Treasury, IRS, or any other agency. The scheme is still the same. This report.fraud, that's the email address that victims can use if they want to report to the Federal Reserve that they've been a victim of a scam involving the name of the Federal Reserve. And here at the bottom, this is the link to the New York Fed's website, and I can quickly show you the page that'll take you to. So this page right here, it's just a screenshot, so I can't move around too much, but this is a page that the Federal Reserve continuously updates advisories regarding frauds and scams. And I highly suggest that you share this website with friends and families and discuss these various scams, even if it's the first way to start the conversation. I attended this webinar, maybe together we should look at these various frauds and scams that are circulating. So on to some scams to be aware of and to make family members aware of. First up is what I dubbed the grant scam. So this one surfaced in about 2010, and it's still going on. It's a typical advance fee scam, meaning that a fee is requested in advance of some type of fictitious award to the victim. In this instance, victims are contacted via emails or text and told that they are the recipient of a federal grant. And in order to receive this grant, they need to pay a fee or a charitable donation to this Federal Reserve representative. Sadly, some people who may have recently applied for a loan or a line of credit may be convinced that this grant is actually legitimate. It's not. And once fraudsters know that they can get money from somebody, they will continuously ask for more processing fees or more donations. Several years ago, the scam took a new twist where fraudsters were asking victims to stay on the phone with them, to go into a Walmart or other store, purchase gift cards. I remember iTunes was a big one at the time, and scratch off the 10-digit code on the back of the card and provide that 10-digit code to the fraudster, therefore giving them access to all the funds that were loaded on the cards. Next is what I nicknamed the intimidation scam. So Victims are contacted by a fictitious Federal Reserve representative, and they're warned that there has been suspicious activity on their bank accounts. They're even accused of transacting with prohibited countries or prohibited individuals. They're told that they have to pay a fee to get this activity removed, and they're warned that if they don't pay this fee, then there may be an arrest warrant out in their name. Again, fraudsters often try to instill fear in order to get a victim to cooperate. They are tricky and they are convincing, and we need to inform as many people as we can about their devious ways. So next is something you may have already heard of. It's more of a conspiracy theory than a scam, being that there isn't a particular fraudster who's making money off of this. But there are tons of YouTube videos informing people that they have a secret Federal Reserve bank account, that they can pay their online bills using their Social Security number as a bank account number, and one of the Federal Reserve Bank's routing numbers as the routing number. Thousands of people have tried this, some almost successfully, to pay bills using these fictitious accounts. When this first initiated, merchants were initially tripped up in this scam, but now there are more protocols in place to stop the payment before it goes through. And during the pandemic, when so many had lost their jobs, the scam had a big surge because people were desperate to pay their bills. But attempting to do this will cause a stop in the payment and potential fees by the merchant, and there's always the possibility of civil or criminal charges. And I just want to show a quick video regarding this. One of these videos that's out there on YouTube that has always fascinated me. So I'm just going to show 1 or 2 minutes of this video.
Welcome to the Intellectual Freedom Movement. I'm your host, Harvey Dent, and tonight I'm going to go over how you can pay your bills right now using your secret Social Security Trust account. That's right, you have a Social Security Trust account that is kept secret, that you didn't even know existed. I can prove it to you. Yes, I can. Well, everyone knows what a Social Security card is, right? Yeah, because you got to have this number in order to get a job so that they can tax you, right? Well, did you know that this card, this number, is used for a little bit more than what you think it is? It is used to maintain a commercial private bank account. It's like basically a commercial entity, a private bank account in this name on this card, which is the same as on your birth certificate, with this Social Security number as your account number. Now, in order to determine which of the Federal Reserve banks is holding your secret account, you're going to look at the number on the back of your Social Security card. Okay, not the one on the front, the number on the back. And you're going to see a letter, all right? Now that first letter you see, that's the only thing you want is that letter. And that letter is going to tell you which of the Federal Reserve districts your account falls in. Okay? So that letter we saw, that letter was C. And what I've done is I simplified this for you. I went on ahead and took the page from the Federal Reserve Bank. And yeah, I simplified this for you and put the letters here. So if you have an A or a B, and then you go and follow, this list to determine which of the banks is, your regional bank. Now,
enough from him. I hope everyone could hear that okay. And Harvey Dent, if that name sounds familiar, trust your instincts. I think he was like Batman's nemesis or Superman's nemesis or something. But your Social Security number is not a bank account number. The number on the back of your Social Security card has nothing to do with the corresponding Federal Reserve routing number. This scam or conspiracy theory is completely fraudulent. Next, I want to cover investment scams. Again, these have been circulating for as long as I can remember. Victims are told that they can participate in secret high-yield investment plans through the Federal Reserve, and that they must give the Federal Reserve representative access to their bank account information or other personal information. I just want to put it out there that employees of the Federal Reserve will never offer investments to the general public. The Federal Reserve does not authorize or license traders to deal with the general public for any type of investment program. So these are false claims and completely fictitious programs. And the last thing I briefly want to touch upon is fake notes. I just want to do a little bit of trivia. I know no one can really answer, but maybe just answer in your head. So what was the largest bill ever printed in US currency? I'm hearing the Jeopardy music in my head. So the answer is the $100,000 gold certificate shown here with the portrait of Woodrow Wilson. These notes were never in public circulation. They were used for a brief period of time in 1934 and only for official transactions between Federal Reserve banks. However, fraudsters often falsely claim that they have these Federal Reserve notes in their possession and are somehow very special and not known to the public because they are so secret. And they've even attempted to sell these fictitious, worthless instruments to victims. If anyone ever claims to have a $100,000 note in their possession or for sale, it's completely fraudulent and the notes are completely fake. So who to contact? And I just went over a few of the scams that I've seen so many during my 18 years at the Fed. I just wanted to highlight a few and quickly who to contact. If you are a victim of a scam that I went over or another one, local authorities. So most local police departments even will have a fraud department and you can speak with them. Your financial institution. If you have given out your bank account information, immediately call your financial institution and let them know and see how they can help. The Federal Reserve is a great resource. The website that I showed earlier can sometimes start the conversation with family members as to different scams that are going on, but the Federal Reserve is not law enforcement, so they cannot press charges against fraudsters. So if you have been a victim, I would initially go to local authorities. And the FBI has an internet complaint center, the IC3, which is also a great resource. Key takeaways, but before I just go through these three, I just want to give a quick story about my mom. So my mom has an eBay store for her quilts and her beautiful crafts. And a few months ago, she was contacted by an eBay representative to inform her that there was that her bank account was compromised and they needed to confirm her banking details. And she got nervous because she loves her eBay store and it's pretty profitable for her. So she started to give them the banking details. And then something stopped her. And she said, you know what, I'm not comfortable doing this. So they said, okay, well, if you feel more comfortable calling your bank, here's Chase's phone number. She calls the phone number that they provided, and lo and behold, it's the same individual she was just on the phone with. And she said, you know what, I'm still not comfortable with this. So she hung up and she went into Chase and she discussed exactly what had just happened to her with one of the Chase branch employees. And just saying it out loud, all these red flags went off in her head. And she was like, you know what, I should have known better. And the employee at the branch said, and this could happen to anyone. She's like, but my daughter, she's a Federal Reserve fraud investigator. And he's like, it doesn't matter. It could happen to anyone. So just some key, and that's what I said to her when she called me. I was like, she was so embarrassed. And I said, Mom, it could happen to anyone. Key takeaways. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. It almost definitely is. If you see something, say something. If something sounds suspicious in an email or a phone call or a friend tells you something that's suspicious, say something, tell someone, even just saying it out loud, go to your branch, go to anyone and just talk about it. And you'll probably get to the bottom that it's a scam. And once again, just like my mom, the mother of a fraud investigator, anyone can be a victim. So there's no shame at all. And that's all I have.
Actually, I think everyone needs a Kristin in their circle of friends. I was just going to see what you were doing for dinner. I mean, that information is so valuable to such a large demographic. I don't care how old you are or who you are. I mean, it's my understanding even teenagers are being scammed now. And, you know,
a lot of our victims, I didn't mean to cut you off. A lot of our victims were college students as well, who had just applied for a student loan or something.
Yeah. So you have to be so careful. And the other thing that really hit home with me is going back to the traditional scamming techniques, the texting, the emails. I mean, what is going to happen if we go back to traditional, but then we incorporate digital technology and AI? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think to be aware, and I love what you said, go to your financial institution, contact the Federal Reserve. I mean, don't be afraid. I'd email them and tell them what's going on to get that type of support. But thank you so much. And we'll see you for the Q&A at the end. And now I'd like to introduce Tami Anastasia. I have known Tami for years. She has really helped me personally in my journey. My father had Alzheimer's for over 10 years. And her book is not just a read from page 1 to page whatever it is, but it's really a how-to. I could go in there and say, I'm having a difficult time redirecting, or now I'm so frustrated, I think I'm gonna, have a nervous breakdown. It's just a really good guide. So I'm really glad you're here today, Tami.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you
So
for
I'll
having
let
me.
you take it away, and then I'll see you at the end.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and go through a quick PowerPoint presentation. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes,
I
we
hope
can.
so. Can? Okay. So again, thank you, Susan, for that nice introduction. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for joining us today. The focus of my presentation is going to be about financial safety and dementia. So as Susan mentioned, I'm the author of Essential Strategies for the Dementia Caregiver, and I have a private practice, and I provide dementia guidance, care strategies, and emotional support to family and professional caregivers. And I also facilitate several caregiver support groups. So I'm going to begin my presentation by having you all keep in mind these following reminders regarding dementia. Because you have to, when we're dealing with dementia, there are certain things you need to remember that will help you know how to engage with a loved one living with dementia. So first, remember, dementia causes cognitive impairment, increased confusion, and brain damage. Dementia also affects the ability to think rationally and process information logically. And dementia can be very complex, very challenging, and unpredictable. And memory loss, irrational thinking, and distorted perceptions are symptoms of dementia. And people with dementia don't have control over the things they say and do. Once a person gets diagnosed with dementia, I default everything to dementia, because what dementia does, it robs them of their ability to censor and filter information. And so they're going to blurt out whatever they're thinking. And they'll often get accused of saying things intentionally to be hurtful. Once we get a diagnosis of dementia, please keep in mind that people with dementia do not have control over the things they say and do. So some financial warning signs of cognitive impairment. One of the questions I'm asked the most is, how do I know if my loved one is showing signs of cognitive impairment in terms of being able to manage their finances? Some of those warning signs are, you'll see they'll have problems counting change, paying for a purchase, balancing a checkbook, or understanding a bank statement. They will sort of have this blank look. They'll see maybe the bank statement, but they won't be able to interpret it or process the information or comprehend what the information is saying. Also, we'll see stacks of overdue bills, bounced checks, delinquent notices, and their utilities may get cut off because they didn't pay a bill. And of course, they'll blame the utilities company because they won't remember that they didn't pay a bill. Also, we'll see many new charges on a credit card, and some strange new merchandise that makes no sense. They'll just kind of go on a spending frenzy, I call it. And then you'll see money might be missing from bank accounts, or they'll be making inappropriate payments. So what do I mean by inappropriate payments? You might start noticing they've been paying neighbor George $400 or $500 for doing little things around the house, or they may make an inappropriate payment to a private caregiver and give her a little extra money to live off of. So these are often red flags that will indicate that your loved one probably is starting to have issues with managing their finances. And I had a client, and I was telling her, I think it's time for your father to probably move into a care community. And she thought he was a little more higher functioning than he was. Well, ironically, she happened to go one week and she was going through his checkbook, and he wrote a $50,000 check to some scam artist. And she flipped out, went to the post office. I can't believe it happened. Got there 5 minutes before the post office closed, and they found the envelope. And this was her deciding factor to put her father into a memory care community. We'll also notice absolutely no recall of receiving any financial documents, and they will have no clue where they are. They'll misplace it, And because of their short-term memory loss, they're not going to have any recall, and they'll put it somewhere and have no recollection. As a matter of fact, they're most likely going to say somebody stole it, someone is stealing from them, somebody is hiding these things. So these are all really good warning signs to be aware of. So you see these warning signs and you think, oh, I'm going to have a logical, reasonable conversation with my loved one with dementia, and it doesn't go well. Well, there's many reasons why. Logic and reason, depending on how advanced the dementia is, why it doesn't go well. Because dementia causes the following communication challenges. So because of short-term memory loss, increased confusion, unable to think rationally, process information logically. Here's what you also want to keep in mind. Depending on how advanced the dementia progresses, at some point, they're going to lose the ability to do things in sequences, which they can't do steps 1 to 5. Somewhere in that sequential memory, they can't do it. And we'll find that if you tell your loved one to say, go and do A, B, and C, they may not be able to do A, B, and C because they don't have that sequential memory. Unaware of their limitations. So this is something everybody needs to be aware of. 60 to 80% of people with dementia will have what is called anosognosia. Anosognosia is a medical term that when there is damage done in the frontal part, lobe of the brain, or temporal part of the brain, that's where self-awareness is contained. And so if there's damage in that area, there is no ability to be aware of their limitations. So a lot of times people living with dementia get accused of being in denial. It's not denial. It's brain damage done in the frontal temporal lobe of the brain. Super important to make that distinction. And they'll have difficulty reading and writing. I'm sure a lot of you have probably experienced that they'll be accusatory, because if they have short-term memory loss and they can't find what they're looking for because they put it somewhere or don't remember where they put it, the default, the brain's default is, well, somebody else must have stolen it. Somebody else must have hid it from me. Paranoia is a symptom of dementia, impaired judgment, poor decision-making, and very impulsive. Like I said, you'll see that excessive spending, and they'll become incredibly argumentative. So these are the challenges that occur because now we have a brain that's not functioning properly. So logic and reason can actually backfire and create a bigger problem. So what are some of the communication pitfalls to avoid? You want to avoid arguing, correcting, or challenging them. You also want to avoid, oh, I have this rule of thumb in the dementia world. The less you say, the better. The more you talk and try to prove a point or explain or give all these details, the more you're probably going to go down the river, and actually it's going to create more frustration for the loved one living with dementia. So less is better. And then being forceful or insistent, you want to try to avoid doing that if you can, and try not to prove a point, and using reasoning and logic. At some point, you're not going to be able to reason with them, and logic will not work. And again, it'll backfire. And then it all becomes about you trying to steal their money. You're trying to control them. You're trying to take their independence away. We want to try to avoid that. And then pointing out their limitations and reminding them of their previous poor decisions will not make a dent in them seeing what their limitations are if they have damage to the frontal or temporal lobe of the brain. And doing this only really is kind of just putting salt in the wound, and we want to avoid doing that. So the big challenge that is very difficult is, how do we communicate with people living with dementia? So we have to be quite strategic, and one way of doing that is to take an educational or informative approach. And one thing you can start doing right now is, instead of saying you to your loved one, instead of saying, you know, you lost this, you did that, replace the word you with we and us. When it's a we and an us, it shows a connection and it increases cooperation. So if we're going to take an educational or informative approach, we might say something like, oh my gosh, Mom, I attended this educational webinar. It was fascinating and I learned so many things. And I'm going to try to implement some of the things I learned, and it would be great if we did this together. Again, you want to include yourself in the process. You don't want to make the problem them, because anytime you try to point out that they are the problem, they're going to get very defensive. So making this a joint effort, making sure it's a we and us, will, increase cooperation. Now, keep in mind also, we can't come up with 10 bullet points that we've all got to do automatically. You've got to break things down so it's manageable. So we might start off with, one of the ways to protect our finances is if I sign on to your bank card at the bank, then I'm going to get Billy, my son, to go ahead and do it for me. I think it would be a great thing for us to do together. And you can only do things like one step, one item at a time. Otherwise, they get overwhelmed and they're going to shut down. And then you're going to get a lot of pushback. So this is one approach. Another approach is have a trusted third party be the messenger. Here, often I'll ask families, does your mother or your father, whoever the loved one is with dementia, is there anybody they admire or they respect? The doctor, the attorney, financial planner, or someone, a family member or a friend that is highly, highly respected. I just did a consult yesterday with a family, and we're trying to get the daughter to be the power of attorney of finances, and mom is just not having it. So I said, well, is there a family friend that your mother really, really, really admires? And they came up with a name, and we came up with some language for this friend to say to the mom to see if we can foster that cooperation. Another way of, again, not making it about the person living with dementia is to normalize the situation by using yourself as an example. Even if you haven't been scammed, even if you haven't had an incident, you want to say, oh my gosh, you know what? This happened to me. And God forbid this should happen to you. And these are protective measures now I have to take. And it would give me such peace of mind if this didn't happen to you, if we went and did A, B, C, and D again, or A and then B. Again, you notice how I'm kind of slanting it. It's not about them not being able to manage their money. It's not about pointing out their limitations. I have to outsmart the dementia. I have to outsmart that they're going to feel that be controlled. And so making us part of a team, working together, doing this together. I'm going to do this, and I think it would be great if you would do it too. We're going to protect each other. It's a we and an us. And then compliment them. We all like compliments. We don't have to have dementia in order to appreciate a compliment, and capitalize on what they are good at. Oh my gosh, Dad, you've been so good with your money. You've done such a great job managing it and saving it. And now it's been brought to my attention that there's some things going on that we need to protect ourselves. And notice how I'm still saying we need to protect ourselves. So compliments do go a long way, and capitalize on the compliments. And then I will say this, you're going to get pushback, probably most likely anyway. What's incredibly important is we've got to acknowledge their feelings, their concerns, and their fears. Where most people make the mistake is we have this agenda and we know what's best for you, but we're not listening to what their fears are. We're not listening to what their concerns are. So how do I know how to approach them if I don't know what they're thinking? So beyond a shadow of a doubt, whether this works or it doesn't work, your goal is to find out and acknowledge, how do they feel about their finances? How do they feel? What is their perception? What is their thoughts? What are their concerns and what are their fears? Then what we do with that information is I can say, thank you for sharing that with me. Let's see what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you for letting me know how you feel, that you're afraid that I'm going to control you and control your money. When we go to the bank, let's see what preventative measures we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because once I know what they're thinking, I'm going to be able, and I'll understand more on how it is I need to respond. So we really want to try to understand and get as much information out of them as possible. Now, earlier on, that's easier to do. As the dementia progresses, most likely you're going to hear a lot of paranoia. Most likely you're going to hear they don't want you stealing their money. They don't want to be controlled. So having that information is going to help us be strategic in how we're going to respond and ultimately know how to get them to protect themselves from these scams and identity theft and all of these things that are going on now in the world. So I would like for us just to take a minute. One of the best ways to figure out how to communicate with a person living with dementia is I'd like for all of us to just take a few seconds. I'd like for you to close your eyes and I want you to put yourself in their shoes. What if you thought you were financially capable of managing your monies, but you weren't? A couple things I want you to think about. How would you like to be approached? Do you want someone to get in your face, tell you what all your problems are and what you're doing wrong? Probably not. So how would you like to be approached? Because you think you're fine. And that's what you all need to remember. People living with dementia believe what their brain tells them. They believe what they believe, even though their brain may be giving them false information. To them, it is valid and it's true. Also, what words and tone of voice would you like to hear? They're super ultra sensitive to our tone of voice, our facial expressions, and our body language. So if you're at all seeming impatient or forceful or insistent, they're going to pick up on that, and we're probably going to get some resistance back from them. And what facial expression and body language would you like to see? Be as supportive, caring, loving, kind as possible. Most likely that will be better received than, again, pointing out their limitations, telling them what their problems are. One thing I would like to say too, one prime opportunity to get a real good jump start on all of this is if a loved one is diagnosed very, very, very early on. Now is the time. That is an ideal time to start putting things in place, to talk about the things that are super, super important in order to protect themselves and as well as protect their monies. So take advantage of early diagnosis if possible. So this is just a lot of information, but these are all different actions to take. Of course, our best scenario is if you can become financial power of attorney. That's not going to happen overnight. Some people may not go along with that for a long time. So we actually take actions behind the scenes and do things that we can get in place as much as possible. So this is just a running list. Access to their online banking. You're going to want to know passwords. You're going to want to know any codes, PIN numbers. And then if you have access to their credit cards in any way, we want to limit it to one credit card and place a limit on the credit card limit. And then you could go to the bank, sign on, do a card. And if at all possible, we get your loved one to cooperate, you want to be the person that the bank notifies you, lets you know that there's some red flags. And one thing you can do, whether you get their permission or not, that I highly encourage a lot of my private clients to do, is go ahead and start intercepting the mail. Do not let your loved one know this, and get a change of address and have everything except for a few things. You got to have a few things still go to their home. But if they have short-term memory loss and the dementia has progressed, they're not going to remember what mail is there and what mail is not. So start taking some of these things that are really important and start having go to the post office and get a change of address. Also, if you can, again, you could set up a credit freeze. And then also if you do get online access, automatic bill payments, and then block suspicious phone numbers. And then if you want to stop junk mail, whether you have access to their financial stuff or not, this is all stuff we can do without them being aware of it. Register with the DMA Choice National Do Not Mail list stops junk mail. Opt, pre-op, pre-screen. There's the phone number, stops credit card offers now. In order to stop credit card offers, you will need their social security number in order to stop those credit card offers. And then there's info scission to request removal from telemarketing mailing lists. So these are just some general ideas, some actions that you can take. And in closing, what I'd like for all of us to do really quick is just to read this quote by Leo Biscaglia out loud together. So on 2, would you join me? 1 and 2. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, and an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to turn a life around. And for those of you who are caring for a loved one with dementia, I would like to say thank you for the love, the care, and the support that you provide day in and day out. It's a very, very, very exhausting and challenging job to take care of a loved one with dementia. And dealing with their finances can be very challenging, but we can do it. So thank you everybody for joining. And now I will turn it back to Susan and unshare my screen.
I'm really feeling fortunate that WayWiser put together this panel of experts.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful that we're going to send this webinar out to everyone. I didn't even know that there was numbers you could stop junk mail and credit card things. It seems ridiculous. Tami, I'm going to say goodbye to you for just a moment and welcome back Benjamin. And then I have a couple questions here from the audience at registration that we will go through, but I will say most of the presentations covered a majority of the questions. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Yes, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you for having me back. I know we only have a few minutes left and people do have some questions, so I am going to just kind of quickly go through some next steps. I'm just sharing a quick screen here. What we want to present is sort of a what we call a 30, 60, 90-day plan. I know that, this is a lot to get into. We just heard a ton of information. We heard a ton about so many different types of scams, so many different types of ways to prevent scams, different types of things we should be looking out for. I mean, there's really a lot out there. So what we want to present is just kind of a simple way to quickly bring us into better protecting our parents, our loved ones, our entire families. Really, this is a whole reciprocal process. We need to do it for ourselves, do it for our parents, do it for our kids, do it for our friends, our loved ones everywhere. So real quick, our 30, 60, 90 plan that we're going to help you with. We're sending you home from materials. First up, it's really just this first month. We are going to send you home with some conversation starters. You'll get that in an email. This is about sort of easing your way into talks about finances with your parents. It's not easy. This is not something anyone really wants to talk about. So we have some clever ways you can kind of start conversations in a friendly way, sort of slowly leading you into what you'd call, the real stuff, right? So we're going to send you home with some of those questions, and you can make some more on your own. Next, in that next 60 days, we say, hey, you're going to conduct a so-called scavenger hunt for information, right? So this is where we're going to just get you out there. You've kind of started these conversations. You are going to look for all that important stuff. You're going to look for, what are you doing about passwords? What's your bank situation? Where are all your accounts? Do you have retirement accounts, investment accounts, savings accounts, checking accounts, accounts you share with a spouse, accounts that are secret for who knows what you're doing with it. You want to look at, legal documents, powers of attorney, wills, trusts, anything like that, medical documents, insurance paperwork. We know that the list is extremely long, and as we get older, it just gets longer. And we want to know, is that stuff in a safe? Is it with our lawyer? Is it in a desk drawer in our home office? Is it, somehow digitally saved just in email? Where is that? That's that next 60 days after you've started these conversations. And then finally, we're going to bring it to that point where we sort of embrace technology, as we say here, and we start storing that information in a secure, in a safe place, something like WayWiser, which we're happy to talk to you about at a later date, where you in your trusted circle can actually access it whenever you need it, whenever something goes wrong, before something goes wrong, after something goes wrong, and you can share that easily across your trusted circle. So again, you will get a follow-up email with the presentations, along with a list of some questions that you can use to start some of these conversations. We're also going to send you with a list of some of those kind of basic documents and information you might want to start looking for. So I recommend, don't trash that email. Don't send it to spam. Make sure you look for the email that comes your way, because there's some great stuff in there that's going to help you out. So yeah, otherwise I'm going to turn it over back to Susan so that we can get some Q&A. Yeah.
I'd like to invite Tami and Randall and Kristin back. And I actually think we should do this again. I think there's so much good information, and I went through all the questions that were submitted at registration. We basically answered all of them. But I think the real takeaways for our audience today is, how to communicate. Everyone touched on that, really good communication skills. How can you involve more than just yourself in the process? Tami, you talked about that. It's really hard to approach someone. I don't care if you have dementia or not. Aging is sometimes not easy, and our environment, our country is aging. The world is aging. We're aging longer, which is good news. But I really think being proactive and getting your ducks in a row is the most important thing. Tami, thank you for your time. Kristin, we all need these people at our dinner table and our circle of friends. WayWiser and Benjamin and Randall, thank you for your stories. And if you're on the East Coast, have a nice evening. On the West Coast, have a good afternoon. And if you're in Austin, Texas, have a good dinner. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all. And thank you to the audience.
Thank you, everybody.